Welcome back to Unit 1, Lesson 30, Production Possibilities Applied. So today what we're going to look at is scholars will be able to calculate opportunity costs from one choice to another. In order to be successful today, you'll be able to create both a production possibility table and a production possibility curve, and you'll be able to identify the opportunity cost between production choices on points of the graph or the table. So our activity today is you're going to watch this video and we're going to do a we do. A we do is we're going to do it together. So I'm going to ask you to pause at certain points and then create some data, and then I'm going to show you how to do it and make sure you're right. And then at the end of class, what you have is an exit ticket, which is on the task for today, the problem that you need to push by 11:59 tonight. So let's get started. What are we looking at? Our scenario. Well, our scenario was just given to us, but as we have seen, the idea here is that President Trump has just got out of the hospital. There we see our glorious leader taking off his mask at the White House, returning from Walter Reed. Now, because the president is still infectious from his recent bout with the coronavirus, the questions about his upcoming debates and whether we'll have more presidential debates have come into question. Okay, all joking aside, let's take a look at what the president is going to do. So because he can't debate, he needs to get his message out, and because he can't go out in public, he needs to do it electronically. So the president has two choices that he's going to work from. He's either going to create Twitter posts or YouTube videos. So based off of the data on how well the president can do this, we know that within a 2-hour variant, he can create 40 Twitter posts. If he reduces his Twitter post by 10, he can produce 2 YouTube videos. If he again decreases it by 10, he can create 1.5 more YouTube videos. And if he does absolutely no Twitter posts, he can create 4 YouTube videos. Okay, we know that we're going to add a bias shift, so we'll take a look at that in a moment. But the first thing we want to do is we want to create our table. So after we go through this, what we're going to want to do is pause this and create the table. I would do that using a Google form, but you can do it through handwriting if you want. But you also need to figure out the opportunity cost going from point to point. Your row in that should have points starting at A. Pause and complete that now. Okay, welcome back. So let's take a look at how we did. So I would go create my Google Doc and create 2 tables because we're going to have to do a shift. So the first thing is we want to put our row, which is our point. So point A was 40 Twitter posts at 0 YouTube videos. That's our production possibility for President Trump. Row B was 30 Twitter posts with 2 YouTube videos. And then row C is going to be 20 Twitter posts. And we said 1.5 more, so that's 3.5 YouTube videos. That leads us to our final point, point D, or row D. If we create 0 Twitter posts, the president can create 4 YouTube videos. Now, normally what we would say is that the president has comparative advantage here in creating Twitter posts, but we have to look at the greater value in other people that are creating them. So we'd have to put them in compare contrast with the vice president. So we'll come to that concept a little bit later. Let's look at trade-offs. So at point A, we have no trade-offs. It's what we have. So if we go from A to B, we see that we lose 10 Twitter posts and we gain 2 YouTube videos, and we can take that fraction and reduce it to -5/1. If we go from B to C, we see we lose 10 Twitter posts and we gain 1.5. And if we look at D, we see that we gain or lose 20 and gain 0.5. So what we're seeing in this automatically is that this will not be a straight line and that we're going to have what is called marginal opportunity cost. So let's take a look at the graph. So in creating our graph, first thing we want to do is set up our vertical and horizontal axes. So in doing that, we're going to want to label those axes based off of each of our decision-making mechanisms or each of our choices. In this case, it doesn't matter which one goes on which axis. That's only true in production possibility curves. That will change when we do supply and demand. So in this case, I'm going to put YouTube on my horizontal axis, and I'm going to put Twitter on my vertical axis. And again, this doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter which axis has which. All right, so at the vertices we have 0. So that's when both produce at 0. Now what I have to do is I have to meter each line. I can meter them differently, but they have to stay equal on the line itself. So on my horizontal axis, for every 2 inches, because I have a big board, I'm going to make a mark, and it's going to go by tens. So I'm going to do it by tens. So you want to make sure you have a little extra room in case we're going to do a shift, which you know we are. So 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. So my meter is by tens. Now I'm going to do YouTube, and instead of going by tens and using a 2-inch barium, I'm going to use 1 inch, and I'm going to do it by ones. And I'm going to leave myself a little extra room at the end just in case I need it for the eventual shifts. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. And you see that I have a little extra room left here at the end in case I need to shift it out. All right, so now I'm going to graph my points. So my first point, row A, was 0 YouTube and 40 Twitter, so it's right on the vertical axis. That's point A, or row A. My next point was going to be at 30 Twitter and 2 YouTube, and I should probably use a ruler for this to make sure that I do this correctly. And you do want the dotted lines on your graph, okay? That's something that I require when I grade these. Okay, so the next point was at 20 and 3.5. Yep, all right, going to use that ruler now. Okay, so I know that's directly between the two, so I should measure it out to be correct. And boom, there's point C. Now point D, we're going to see a drastic drop off. That is at 0 Twitter, and we create 4 YouTube. So it's right on my horizontal axis. And that will be my point D. And right here we can see the idea or concept of marginal opportunity cost. The more I put in, the less that I'm getting out. And you'll see that from that sharp drop, which gives us more of a curved out bowed line rather than a straight line, which we would call opportunity cost. All right, now that we've done that, what we want to do is we want to go in and put in our shift. So there are neutral shifts and bias shifts. Bias shifts affect only one of our products, and we can see here that the president has gotten new editing software that will double his YouTube production. So what you need to do is create a new table for this production. So again, what you want to do is go back and adapt so that we can create a new line, which means we need a new table with new opportunity costs. Now, there are 2 types of shifts, bias shifts and neutral shifts. Neutral shifts affect both of the products. Bias shifts only affect one. Go ahead and hit pause and continue on to your next chart. Okay, so let's check out how you did. So if we go, we know that we have 3 points because point A is going to stay the same. It doesn't change. So at 30 Twitter posts, we now create 4 because we doubled our YouTube production. At 20 Twitter posts, we now have created 7 because, again, we doubled our YouTube production, but does not affect our Twitter production. And at our new point G, we have 0 Twitter, but now we have 8 YouTube videos. So now we go figure out our opportunity cost. So point E is now coming from point A, so 40 to 30 is negative 10, but we now have it over 4, which we can reduce by fraction to negative 5 over 2. Okay, quick little division there. Now we go from 30 to 20 in Twitter posts, so that's negative 10, and we go up by 3 in YouTube, so negative 10 over 3, and then finally we go down by negative 20 over 8, which we can reduce that fraction again to negative 5 over 2. Apparently Mr. Height can't do mental math and type this. There we go, -5/2. All right, now let's go graph it. Okay, so your final graph should look something like this. So notice the things that we've added. So on the green line, we've added point E, point A, or point F, and point G, and notice the line pointing outwards. That shows the bias shift outwards, and that shows us the shift in the line. We've also added point Y and point X, and we've added the key to the top, Y equals unattainable, X equals inefficient, and A through D equals efficient. But also A through G equals efficient as well, which we probably should have added. As this graph stands right now, this is a complete production possibility graph with all of the information for the graph itself that I would ask and the tables as we completed them. All right, so what are our questions?
Excuse me, sit down. You weren't called. Sit down. Sit down. Sit down. Go ahead.
I'm kidding. You can't ask me questions. I'm a recording. Either log back into class or send me an email. Now, let's take a look at your UDO or your assignment for tonight or your exit ticket that needs to be turned in by 11:59. Okay, your fiefdom. A fiefdom is like a city. Can either complete essays or projects. Those are your two choices on a weekly basis. That's your time frame. If your fiefdom worked on only essays, it can complete 10 essays a week. For every 5 essays the group doesn't make, you can make 1 project. You should be able to fill in your chart with that information and give me the opportunity cost. Again, you have a shift. Your group receives a new vassal, which doubles overall productivity. Now remember, a vassal is kind of like another worker, and it's going to double overall productivity. So apply that as your shifter. I look forward to seeing those tonight. Have a great night.